Welcome to the Assembling Inclusion podcast. On this show, we feature different programs, individuals, and initiatives focused on being more inclusive of individual needs. We invite you to learn right alongside us. If you want some additional resources or access to our courses, please visit our website or follow us on social media. But for right now, let's get right to the episode. Coming up next on the Assembling Inclusion podcast.
And so for me, it was super important to have that represented, because when I was little, all I wanted to see was someone out in the world who was like me. And I didn't necessarily have that. So I want to be part of conversations that help build that for the people that come after me.
In today's episode, I talked to Jen Schlegel. I first reached out to Jen to talk about her work as one of the Ohio Tech Ambassadors, but after I checked out her bio on the website, I learned about all the awesome things that she's been doing. So I'm really excited to share my conversation with her as she tells us about her company, her inventions, her ideas, and her experiences. Welcome back to the Assembly Inclusion podcast. I'm here today with Jen Schlegel, and she is one of the Ohio Tech Ambassadors. So we're going to talk about her work with that program, as well as her company and her work in assistive technology overall. Jen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
So just to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hey, everybody. I'm Jen. I'm from Coshocton, Ohio, and I'm a biomedical engineer. I lead an interesting life with a whole bunch of health problems, which led me on my career path. So day-to-day practice, I accidentally started a tech startup in college and deal with accessibility within my biomedical engineering practice. Other hats that I wear is that I'm a certified ADA coordinator, as well as being one of the Ohio Tech Ambassadors.
That's awesome. So you have so many different experiences, which I think is so great. I was reading your bio and I was like, wow, there's just like so many different aspects to the different work you're doing. I know you had talked about using accessibility and your own experiences to start your startup. What are some of the technologies that you use in a typical day, if you don't mind sharing?
So I have to laugh when I hear this question, because I start wondering what actually is a typical day anymore, because every day of my life is so different. Because when I wake up in the morning, I don't know what of my health problems is going to be causing me problems. So I kind of have solutions for all of it, no matter what shows up. But technology is the thing that runs my typical day to day. Some days it's things like having a feeding tube and an IV in my arm and having the pumps to run both of those. Other days it's more generic, like sitting around using a smartphone to do all of my communication and emails. Other days it's things like I'm not moving too well, so I'm literally talking to my apartment to change the temperature and turn the lights on and off. It's an integral part of my life, and I use everything from low fidelity tech like a coffee collar and some tape to hold my fork better, to high fidelity fancy whiteboard computers.
I appreciate the fact that you addressed that, there's a lot of range of technologies that you could be using from the low to the high side in terms of complexity of the devices, but yet they all have their function and purpose. They're beneficial for your daily life.
I probably use somewhere between 5 and 10 devices an hour. I guess you could call me a super user, because technology really is the way I make my life work.
I noticed in your biography on the Ohio Tech Ambassador website, it had mentioned that you were an idea fountain, or a friend called you an idea fountain. What do you think has been your most impactful idea or innovation so far? And I know we're going to get into talking about your startup and everything in a little bit, but what do you think have been your best ideas you've had?
That's a really difficult question for me to answer. Not so much because I think all my ideas are great, but more so because there are several that have been heavily impactful on the direction of my life, but also some that I hope will be impactful for other people's lives. So when I think about it from a personal standpoint, I think about one of the projects that I'm currently working on that would deeply change my day-to-day life if I can get it up and running and into existence. It's a current Ohio State University President's Prize Fellowship project, where the premise is to have a verbal written communication platform so that the community like me that may not be able to hold a pencil due to dexterity challenges is able to do written work without needing a scribe. That one comes from a very deeply personal place for me because while I've always struggled with dexterity in my life throughout it, about a quarter of the way through college, I had some significant health problems that led me to have to start all over on my dexterity. And I still can't hold a pencil very well at all, which gets very challenging in terms of when you are a STEM student, how in the world are you going to do calculus and draw diagrams if you can't hold a pencil? And it was very painful. And I tried a whole bunch of different things and didn't really find a great answer other than using another human to write it down for me. That to me wasn't sustainable, that I realized that there needed to be a better answer. So as part of the fellowship that I'm currently on, I'm trying to build that platform. So that for me is super impactful because it would revolutionize my day-to-day life. When I think about bigger impact though, I think about one of my other projects. And it's slightly ironic to me that when I think about the things that are the most impactful ideas, that both of the ones I think that have had the biggest impact are two that are actually currently active. So maybe there might be something to that. But so this other project is trying to revolutionize the 911 experience for the chronic illness disability communities. We personalize so much in our day-to-day lives now. Like, why can't we personalize some emergency responses? It came again from my personal experience because my sophomore year of college, I had 15 911 calls in 3 weeks. I only wanted one of those 15 calls, but there didn't seem to be a better way to tell the people around me that, like, hey, I'm totally fine. I need 5 minutes and a glass of water, not some paramedics. Because 911 is great when you need it, but when you don't, it can be really painful. And so when I started working on that, it really came to the forefront of my mind as I started digging into it that, like, I need to solve this for myself, but it seems like a lot of other people could use it too. And so that's why I think it's so impactful, because I think it could hopefully grow into something really good to help a lot of people.
I love that they both kind of started from personal experiences, but it has opened up and you've seen that they could be, I could see how both could be extremely beneficial for a variety of different people with different needs. So the 911, it would customize then what type of response would be received if somebody were to call 911, or would it be a way to prevent someone from maybe calling it if you don't need it, like a way to verbalize that?
Right. The way I like to think about it would be the next generation of the medical ID bracelets that a lot of the community wears, where incorporating technology into that could help facilitate better response from paramedics, because then they would be able to know, based off an individual's health history, what might be happening when they show up on the scene. But in addition, helping those of our community that are just looking to avoid 911 calls that are made by well-meaning bystanders who just don't necessarily know that what might be happening is a typical occurrence in that individual's day-to-day life.
I think that's a really great idea. I'm sure that's really impactful for a lot of different people. I wanted to jump into, you have your own startup company, correct? And would you be able to, I mean, I know you addressed two of your great and impactful ideas so far, but are there any specific projects that you're working on within your startup right now that you would like to tell us a little bit about?
So I accidentally started a company in college. I didn't mean to at all. I literally was just trying to get by in my day-to-day life and not get thrown out of college for not being able to keep up with my classmates or ending up at the hospital too often, etc. And I started realizing that the problems that I was having, it didn't seem like there were great solutions out there for them. And so in my desperation, I'm not the type to sit around and be idle when I have a problem that I can't figure out how to solve. So I started going to weekend pitch events, and I was hoping to just find some collaborators that could help bring some of the ideas that I had to life just to solve my own problems. But when I started doing that, I started gaining some traction. But the thing that I recognized early on was it wasn't just that I could have an idea and necessarily hand it off to other people. The appeal for other people was to have me building these things, because it seemed like whereas people wanted to help, the perspective that I was bringing to the table, they weren't necessarily familiar with. So it seemed like there was a lot of value in me assisting with these projects and not just trying to hand them off to other people. And so gaining some traction with these projects led to funding, and funding led to accidentally starting a company. The way I like to think about my company is that with clothing, there are different houses. Everyone has their favorite brand. And so you might be buying a pair of pants from Gap or Old Navy or Chanel or whatever brand you can think of. But at the end of the day, they're all pants. It's just a different take on pants. And so I like to think about topics like accessibility the same way, where there should be different houses of accessibility, where this is just one way to do accessibility, and a little less of an emphasis on what are the standards, what makes us compliant, and a little bit more of different options. That led me here to trying to build my take on accessibility. This is me trying to build the things that would help me and hopefully help a lot of other people. So in total, I think I probably have about 17 different projects, but the two that we've previously mentioned are the two that are most active because they currently have funding. In addition, some of the other projects in my back pocket are more physical object product based, because that's actually where I got my start. My first idea was a writing device that would go on your finger. And then the other one that is on the horizon for me at the moment was actually the one that I did first when I was in college. If HandyCom, the writing platform, is about how do you write if you can't hold a pencil, then HandyCap is about how do you code if you can't use a keyboard.
Oh, that's interesting. And how's that been going?
So that one actually, as I mentioned, I started first while I was in college, and it was worked on by a team of students at Ohio State alongside me. It was my first experience of being a project manager. We had weekly meetings for almost 2 years, and the platform got to the point that we actually filed for a patent pending. But as I've discovered throughout this journey, building software when you are not the software developer yourself can be very expensive or very resource intensive. So that is a project that's currently on an inactive status while I look for additional funding to be able to finish it.
That's really amazing that you have so many different projects going on within your company. And I love the story of like it was an accidental startup, but that seems like it's been really doing some great work, even if it wasn't the intention to start out a company.
Thank you. I thought I'd be in medical school right now, which is exactly where I'd still like to be in the end. But the way that I see it, the things that I'm trying to build are the things that are going to help me get there.
I could see that. And it all kind of connects together in a way in the end. And I love the metaphor you gave about accessibility in the different houses. I was an educator, so I come at it from an education perspective all the time, and trying to fit people into the technology instead of like making it to fit them to begin with. So when you were explaining that, I was like, that just makes a lot of sense. But I wanted to jump into talking about your work with the Ohio Tech Ambassadors, which is initially how I found you. So can you tell us about that program a little bit?
So the Ohio Tech Ambassadors, it's a really fun program. It's an initiative in the state of Ohio to have individuals with developmental disabilities. Fundamentally, we get to have the fun of running around Ohio, talking to organizations and boards of developmental disability, and most importantly, individuals and families who are impacted by developmental disability, about the joys of assistive technology and how it impacts our day-to-day lives, and how it is definitely something to look at incorporating into other individuals' lives to improve our lives. Because assistive technology is not something to be afraid of just because of fear of the unknown. It's something to embrace because of the benefits that it brings to all.
So what made you want to apply? Actually, I should start off with, is it an application process? Do you have to be recommended for it? And what made you want to become involved?
The Ohio Tech Ambassadors is grant funded in Ohio. There is an application process. We actually are still looking for a few ambassadors, so that's available on our website. I first ran across the ambassadors program during its first year as a participant. It was something that randomly popped up across my social media, and I decided to go check it out. It was one of those things that incorporated some of my favorite topics of inclusion and assistive technology. Assistive technology is one of the core components of my life that I was like, cool, an opportunity to talk about one of my favorite things. So in checking that out, I remember thinking when I was sitting through the opening meeting of the tech ambassadors, I was like, man, how do I get involved in this? And so when the next cycle came around, I applied for it. And I think it's super important in a lot of different ways. But I think the big important thing to me about it was representation. Because I think so often, at least in my lived experience, when we talk about developmental disability, it feels as though commonly out in the world, developmental disability is frequently seen in a binary or stereotypical way, and a little less of the total spectrum that it is. So in watching the tech ambassadors, I saw a great opportunity for representation. And I also saw that there was an opportunity potentially for the space on the spectrum that I have lived within to be represented. Because thinking through that stereotype of developmental disability in my life, it's not something that people have necessarily recognized in terms of just some of the lived experience that I've had, despite the fact that I am developmentally disabled. I was born 3 months early. I have a lot of lived experience of living with developmental disability. And so for me, it was super important to have that represented, because when I was little, all I wanted to see was someone out in the world who was like me. And I didn't necessarily have that. So I want to be part of conversations that help build that for the people that come after me.
And that's really great that now you can have an opportunity to do that, because I'm assuming now you can go and talk to other individuals and families and allow somebody who might have a similar life experience see you and feel that representation. I'm sure that's really powerful and wonderful for them as well.
That is what I hope is one of the best takeaways of the Tech Ambassador program.
So within the program, you have what's called the consultation hours. What do those traditionally look like?
So I find with consultation hours that there isn't necessarily a traditional format. So anyone can hop on our website and request a consultation hour with one of the tech ambassadors. We ideally hope that they will be utilized the most by families and individuals that are in the spectrum that want to potentially talk about assistive technology. I've seen consultation hours be everything from a casual conversation with families about, hey, this is how assistive technology works in my life, to more of a group setting with a dozen individuals who want to talk about how to utilize social media safely. So it can be a full range of different things that can fall within consultation hours. But we definitely hope that whatever the format takes, that it creates good conversations about assistive technology and how supportive it can be.
I like that it's a wide variety. Then you can really tailor it to what an individual person or a family might need. I'm assuming now probably it's done virtually, or do you actually travel out?
Well, at least for me, all of the ones that I've been a part of have been virtual, but I do believe if it can be arranged from a geography standpoint, we're happy to do some of those in person if it meets everyone's needs.
That makes sense. So aside from the consultation hours, what other types of initiatives are there within that program that you're involved in?
At the moment, and our program continually evolves and grows, but for the moment, outside of consultation hours, we put on individual events to work with the community, as well as we frequently are a part of other organizations' events and other opportunities. In my inbox today, came across one that there's a request for us to be part of a video. So as part of community engagement with various organizations, I've been to luncheons, we've put on events, we'll do videos. We're happy to hop on calls for boards of developmental disability and other organizations. And fundamentally, anybody in the state of Ohio who wants to talk about assistive technology, we're happy to come join you.
That's really great. There's so many different opportunities and ways to get the discussion about assistive technology out there.
I would just throw out that it is also, I think it's very blessed that when we look at all the current tech ambassadors and you put us kind of on a map, it kind of conveniently works out where there's almost a tech ambassador from each region of Ohio, which definitely helps facilitate being able to do more and go to more events. Because specifically for in-person events, then we can make sure that it's not too travel difficult for any one ambassador.
Oh, that's really great that everybody's kind of in a different location. So and it also keeps the message consistent then across the state. You have representation from each part of the state. That's really great. Based on your experiences so far with the program, how have you seen the program be beneficial?
This is a bit general, but I think it sums up my experience. I always find it really fascinating when we go to events or we're talking to people and when we get to be someone's initial conversation or first thought about assistive technology, because there's kind of this light bulb moment where you can see individuals who previously might have been very scared at the idea of technology about, what about my privacy? What about all these things that they might be afraid of? But then they get to watch us demonstrate the technologies, because at some of our events, like we'll bring tables and bring some of our own devices. That it's really fascinating to watch that light bulb moment when we get to help someone realize that assistive technology could be a benefit instead of being a burden. That to me is the magic moment behind this program.
I love that. I'm sure that happens quite a bit as people start to become more familiar with different ways the technology could be supportive and beneficial. So my last question is just kind of overall with regard to assistive technology and inclusion. What do you think from your own experiences, society or people in general need to understand and be more aware of with regard to assistive technology?
This is definitely going to be solely my own personal opinion.
That's totally fine.
I tie assistive technology into accessibility, but this is the way that I view it. I view accessibility, and therefore by extension, assistive technology, as an invisible thread that connects us all, right? It is in everything, everywhere we look. And so the number one thing I want society to understand when we're thinking about assistive technology is not to silo it. Assistive technology is not a disability-only concept. It is not a chronic illness only concept. It is an everyone concept. Because to me, at the end of the day, assistive technology is anything that makes someone's life better. And that does not mean that it only improves the lives of marginalized or minority communities, whether that be, again, disability or chronic illness. It's an everyone topic. Everyone uses assistive technology in their lives, whether or not they see it that way. Everyone with a smartphone is using assistive technology all day long. So I truly hope that our culture can get to a point that can recognize that, yes, this is a topic that is incredibly beneficial to these marginalized communities. But it's kind of like the idea of what is the expression where a tide raises all boats? Assistive technology is one of those concepts that can help every single person it touches improve their lives. And so I think that once, as a culture, we stop siloing it, we can spread the core message further and farther and faster. That core message being about just how impactful assistive technology is.
It resonates with me a lot. I think back to being in the classroom and having access to a specific, even just accessibility features that are built into the device, and people trying to stop students who didn't have an IEP or a specific learning disability from accessing some of those resources. And it's like, no, but that's available to everyone. Let everyone use it so we can make the class a little bit more inclusive, so that the kid on one side of the room is using text to speech to listen to it, but so is the kid on the other side of the room. And that's totally fine. And we're trying to be more inclusive. So I think that's a really great message.
Inclusion isn't inclusion if you're excluding someone to do something.
Exactly. That's definitely true. Oh, well, I want to thank you so much, Jen, for just telling us about all of your work that you're doing and your experiences. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Katie. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Assembling Inclusion podcast. I hope the information in this episode taught you something new, gave you a new idea, or showcased a new perspective. If you liked the episode, feel free to leave us a review or comment. If you have a recommendation for an individual or an organization who would make a great guest, you can message us on Twitter or Instagram, or send us an email at assemblinginclusion@gmail.com. See you next time.